For the first 2 seasons of The Walking Dead, it was just a show that my mom and I watched. Nobody talked about it, I was pretty sure we were the only 2 people watching it, and then when season 3 rolled around, it became something else entirely. Maybe that's not your experience, but when season 3 came out, I was just starting high school, and all my friends and I were kind of like, oh, you're watching this show too? It was something everybody was watching, and since I was the resident nerd to everybody that I knew, it gave me the opportunity to talk to the big, scary, older kids on the bus, because any questions they had about the show, I knew the answers to. The show was now huge to everyone. It was the water cooler show for people at work, something students talked about with each other and teachers, and it was weirdly a show that all ages seemed to enjoy. The Walking Dead was just starting to enter its prime. It really wouldn't hit that for another few years, but I think back to season 3 as the season that the show really started to become popular. So let's take the prison, watch some heads float in jars, and katana our way through The Walking Dead season 3. There's a lot to love about season 3, but there's also a lot of questionable things about season 3. I always thought back on this season really fondly. Watching it again, I still have a lot of really good things to say about it, but it's also not exactly the season I remember for a variety of reasons. So I'll be going over different plot points, character arcs, all sorts of things, but let's start off with the first episode and the very first scene. The opening sequence shows us just how much time has passed since we last saw the group. There's obviously the look of them. Lori is far more pregnant than she was before, everybody's really dirty and grimy, and Herschel looks far different. They even go to show him last because we're supposed to be like, whoa, Herschel really let himself go. But what I love about this scene is that there's no dialogue. They're clearing this house as a unit. They have this trust in each other that wasn't there before, and they have a clear formula for doing these things now. The group is also far more competent now. Even Carl is clearing rooms and making shots that Rick couldn't do in the first season. Gone are the days where Rick runs away from 2 walkers. Really, anybody in this group can take down anything that comes their way. They find the prison and come up with a plan to clear the walkers instead of just saying, well, it's overrun, better look elsewhere. And they also take the prison in just a few minutes. If this was a later season, they'd find the prison, take an episode to discuss if they want to take it or not. If they can take it, something would happen to prevent them from doing it, and after 5 or 6 episodes, there'd be a cliffhanger on whether or not they actually did take it. But nope, this was season 3, and everything in this 16-episode season is paced beautifully. Rick is immediately a more hardened man. He really can't stand Lori, he doesn't take shit from the prisoners, and killing Tomas because he stands in opposition against him really puts that in perspective. This really isn't the same Rick as the first 2 seasons. This is also the season that Rick really starts to become a great character and leader, at least in some episodes. I also think this is when Andrew Lincoln really sets into the role and understands the character. Not that he didn't before, because he always did, but it seems really like he's more comfortable and able to play up smaller scenes and put his own spin on the character. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I feel like the first 2 seasons he was more confined between 2 lines, and now he feels comfortable playing outside those lines, if that makes any sense. Same goes with Carol, who seems to have adapted since we last saw her, learning some of Herschel's tricks about healing and also seeing life the way it is now. She's more confident in herself and her skills and sticks up for herself. She also gets colder and darker as the season goes on, telling Andrea to sleep with the governor so that way she can kill him, and even sticking up to Merle and confronting him about what side he's really on. This is a far cry from the Carol we knew at the beginning of the series, and even at the beginning of the season when the writers were contemplating killing her off. One of the primary characters introduced in this season is, of course, Michonne. Across the first half of the season, Michonne has very few lines. In episode 6, she's one of the featured storylines but doesn't say a single word. But we also identify with her and support her character because she's the only one who thinks something is wrong with the governor and Woodbury. So the show was really making us support Michonne and go against Andrea. It's easy for an audience to watch a show with all the information and root for Michonne to unravel everything. It's It's kind of like character 101, but it's also much easier to look at a character making the wrong decisions and root against them, which this season does at every turn they can with Andrea. I have a lot of thoughts on Andrea. I'll get to more of them later, but as it stands, I think Andrea gets a really bad rap. Not because the decisions that she makes are polarizing, she makes every single bad decision possible in this season, but because I think the writers did her so dirty. She was a sacrifice in this show for more drama, but they knew the audience wouldn't side with her or even root for her or even respect her, and I honestly feel really bad for Laurie Holden, but more on that in a bit. Laurie's death episode is great. I have an episode analysis on it, I'll link to it right now, but this episode is literally just a bad day that keeps getting worse and worse, and it obviously changes the trajectory of the show. Daryl steps up when Rick is going insane from Laurie's death. He immediately recognizes that Rick is losing it, goes out on a run to get baby formula, which I feel like they should have had a long time ago, but whatever, and even steps outside his own comfort zone to become a leader for the group. It's stuff like this that made Daryl become the character that he eventually became and a great replacement as protagonist of the show. One thing I need to bring up in regards not only to this season but the entire show is the makeup and practical effects. This season, they got a noticeably bigger budget, and still a lot of that went to the effects. While there's tons of zombie media out there, none of them look nearly as good as The Walking Dead's zombies. That goes from season 1 to the end of the show to all the spin-offs. Everything about the makeup, the practical effects in this show, in its entirety, is an A+. Insane Rick is probably my least favorite Rick in the show. He's just a selfish asshole. Might be a comparison that only a few of you guys understand, but it kind of reminds me of the Order of the Phoenix book, because Harry is an insufferable asshole for like half of that 800-page book, and it's this character that you really like and connect with, but can't really connect with at the moment, and that's how I feel about Rick in the beginning of this season. Rewatching the show in its entirety has been such a treat because it reminds me of episodes like the mid-season finale, an episode I've probably only seen 1 or 2 times, and it's absolutely excellent. I'm actually surprised I don't have an episode analysis on it yet, but it's going to be one that I do here very shortly. There's so many different layers to the storylines, and the human encounters used to carry so much weight behind what's going on. This was built up from the 3rd episode of the show when the governor was introduced, and the stakes feel so high because of its proper build-up. There's a lot of highlights in this episode, but one of them is the suspense built up between Daryl and Merle fighting on opposite sides. Daryl has the most interesting story this season that he ever gets the whole show. When Daryl leaves with Merle, there's a noticeable emptiness in the prison. The struggle between wanting to help your brother or your family is very interesting, and it takes a toll on every single person at the prison. The second half of season 3 is nowhere near as good as the first half. A lot of it just feels underwhelming because it's supposed to be Rick versus the governor and all the drama surrounding that, but it just doesn't live up to the expectations set up from the first half. There's some great moments and resolutions like Glenn and Maggie getting engaged and Merle's redemption, and even the episode where Rick and the governor meet and the conversations that play out between them and everyone outside is really excellent writing, but a lot of that tension and suspense is lost along the process. I think the best episode in the second half of the season is Clear, which is strange because this is, on all accounts, a bottle episode. But seeing Morgan again after so long and all the dialogue between him and Rick is so interesting. We also got to see Carl bond with Michonne, which is huge for their friendship. This is also kind of like the first family outing, so for a bottle episode, this ends up being pretty important in the context of the future of the show. Rick's speech in the penultimate episode about how this has to be a democracy shows how different he is from the governor and proves thematically how important the threat he posed actually was. It was the perfect time in the show to introduce a human villain because the world had grown, these characters had grown, and it further reinstates that this show is a drama about characters surviving in the apocalypse, not just a zombie survival show. Rick's internal struggle about trading Michonne over to the governor is another really great bit of writing. Michonne has done nothing but help the group since she arrived, but she also doesn't really mean much anything emotionally to anybody, at least not as much as the other people in the prison. prison? On paper, it makes a lot of sense for Rick to trade her, but he can't do that. That's his humanity right there, and it's another thing that separates him from the governor. So Merle takes it upon himself to do it, but even he has a shred of humanity left, and pays for it with his life in what is Daryl's most emotional scene in the entire show. The finale itself is very underwhelming, but also indicative of how the second half of the season went overall. I'd say it's probably my least favorite finale across all seasons. Andrea's whole storyline is just badly executed, and it truly feels like they wrote it to have the audience root against her. She wants to play both sides and expects everybody at the prison to welcome her back with open arms, and after everything she learns about the governor, she still doesn't try to do anything up until it's too late. I felt nothing at her death, and sure, Laurie Holden had a contract up to season 7, but the writers did her so dirty this season that winning the audience's favor back would be too tall a mountain to climb. Andrea takes her sweet ass time getting the pliers off the ground, having such a difficult time doing it too, and then just kinda sits around when Milton is dying and has absolutely no agency whatsoever. It's infuriating writing, and it's when the audience wants to see your character die. Her death doesn't even make narrative sense. She didn't contribute anything to the war, have them form a truce, absolutely nothing. I think the writers saw an opportunity to kill off a fan least favorite and went for it. Laurie Holden has even spoken out about the writing for her character. She said that it's not the direction that she was told that they were going in, and it's not the direction that she wanted to go in, so overall I just feel very bad for her. There is an interesting moment in the finale. Michonne asks Rick about why he saved her, if it was just for the baby formula, and he says, "Nah, it must have been something else." Is that some kind of romantic spark between them? I don't know, I'm probably just going crazy. Them together would be a long shot. It probably wouldn't happen for like at least another 3 seasons. So those are my thoughts on season 3. This is actually a bit shorter than I expected, but I've said everything I need to say, I think. I still think this is a really good season, but it's far from the series' best. The first half of the season is like a straight A+, but the second half I'd say is like a B- or C+. So to round all that out, input the equation, carry the 2, I'd say it's like an 8.5 out of 10. Now we get to see what life is like at the prison with the governor gone. Sorta. But what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like this, I'm going to be doing a video on each season every month of this year, so subscribe to see more, like the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.